Welcome to Between Shelves,
where we make connections between literature, theology, philosophy, psychology, and culture.
Join us as we explore the interconnectedness of race, spirituality, psychology, and meta-modernism.
Each episode invites you into a thought-provoking journey, unpacking how these elements shape our understanding of the world and ourselves.
My name is Aaron Waldron. We're a religiously traumatized theopoet and a shaman in journey. Our work focuses on creating community and between spaces for religiously traumatized millennials, navigating life beyond colonized religion.
And my name is Rafael Reyes. My work is on the importance of imagination and theopoetics in philosophy and religious pluralism.
We invite you to Between Shelves
to learn,
listen,
and become.
Welcome
everyone.
Yes, welcome. Welcome to the first episode. Today we are briefly talking about race, why we are coming together to talk about race. We both are engaged in a writing project outside of this podcast, and it's developing into a book. And each chapter, we are going through things that are relative to and important to the development of one's identity, understanding of self, decolonization. So there's various topics we're talking about. Rafael, was there anything you want to add to that?
No, yeah. I think we definitely come from different backgrounds, different areas of study.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they all cross this area, which is looking at our identities, issues of race. And so I think it was just appropriate to kind of come together and discuss it. I mean, for me, part of my engagement, I really have this fascination with imagination, the imaginary, and images, and how it engages in areas of philosophy and theology. And that question of race is sort of like this image stereotypes that kind of come up, and it's just a fascinating journey to see, well, what makes that image what it is. And so, for me, for myself, that is an important journey for me to engage in as we're having these discussions. And I think it's important just because, at the speed of what we're getting information nowadays in the field of technology, you got to slow down. And you need to have voices that are willing to walk that space. And I hope that this is one of them.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. This project manifested from basically those mutual beliefs and coming together to talk about these issues, not to argue, but to express, to explore, deconstruct, analyze, and offer suggestions, maybe things we didn't think about. This is definitely part of Paulo Freire's critical thinking and critical pedagogy, just engaged in open dialogue for the purpose of learning, mutually learning, sort of like that mutual immanence in the theological space where we affect God just as much as God affects us. You affect me just as much as we affect you. And so it goes from the micro to the macro. And so talking about films, literature, books, concepts, ideas, however dense or simplified through mythology or fantasy, they all have some sort of truth to them. And so we're on a journey to really explore and try to find these truths for ourselves. So today we are talking about race. But before we get into this very complicated topic, we have to kind of start out with some breadcrumbs. In talking about race, how do we understand race already? What are some ideas or patterns, imagery, sounds of race that come to mind when we're thinking, like, say, modern times, postmodern, meta-modern? How have they evolved? How have they changed? How have they been challenged? How have they been helpful to people better understanding themselves and how to reclaim their identities, if at all, you know. What do you have any thoughts on that, Raphael?
You know, I teach a college course at Marist University. Shouting out to Marist. I'm an adjunct there, so I have a great set of students there, and proud to be teaching them. And we were looking at a book called Ethics of Awesomeness by an author named Nick Riggle. Anyway, the discussion on ethics and race became really, really interesting. And the way the author really kind of led us into that conversation. And you know, when you're talking about race, and we haven't even begun to think about how it looked like from a modernist perspective, postmodern and metamodern, but race, as we define it, definitely is a social construct. It's not a biological construct. It's how society looks at our physical differences, and they tend to categorize based on what they see, right? Leading to areas of discrimination, oppression, systematic inequality. We see that in the simplicity of, you know, and this happens often, and I'm not trying to diminuate local law enforcement, but local law enforcement may stereotype a Black person walking in a white neighborhood and automatically think that they are here to hurt someone, rob someone, or something of that effect. And those scenarios, they never thought about, oh, maybe they live there. Maybe they're going to visit someone, right? It's always the other scenario. It's a negative, diminutive, marginalized scenario, you know? And I think that's where racism really seeds, right? In that lived experience, we see its effect. That, you know, shootings, killings of our Black brothers and sisters, the lack of concern, the lack of need of education when we're looking at neighborhoods, right? What we don't tend to see are the values and the creation of those stereotypes of race and racism, which is where I think where we want to go to. And I'll pause that out. Definitely, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great segue into even like one of the main methodologies being applied in the background, which would be theopoetics, right? Which empowers everyone to approach the unapproachable, to talk about the indescribable, to even bring up the things that are, so to speak, the white elephant in the room. For so long, you can see that things have been normalized over time. And so with that becomes the narrative being, you know, watered down and simplified to serve a specific agenda. And we can look at any path of history and you can see this. The conquerors always tell their biased version of, you know, how it went down. And, you know, in some of these retellings of history, we see that there's a perspective that God was behind this, like endorsed this. God was like, this is okay. I want you and these group of people to do this for me, you know? And so like, it's easy to make that like a scapegoat kind of thing. Like you never really deal with accountability of what you've done. Right. And we're linking this directly to like slavery because race does come from this area of life where, you know, here in America, early start of America, slaves were the dominating form of economy, right? Free labor. And so when we look at that and say, how did this happen when we have a Bible, we have stories in this Bible, you know, and we start to see that in history, that Bible was edited and things were cut out specifically to not allow the reader to question things. And so when we see this kind of like tailoring of history and tailoring of religious narratives, it's kind of hard to now understand like how much of what we think we know is truth in the terms of something that can help me become who I really am. And if all I know are lies, then I'm going to become a lie. Right. And so for me, I grew up watching films and loved films, especially the classic films, that come to mind. I think the earliest black and white film that actually had no sound for me was Birth of a Nation, 1915, directed by D.W. Griffith. This film is historically impacting. It's perceived and believed to be sort of the genesis of the Ku Klux Klan, which is a Christian organization, FYI. And this film reinforced, stereotypes, but these stereotypes were very harmful when you think about it. It caused groups of people to hate other groups of people, like to be afraid of particular groups of people based on how they look. This is insane. So they used cinema in this way to get to certain audiences. And, for a long time, we meditated on this and thought about this. Like, who the hell would be watching such a film during that time? Not poor people. From the economy standpoint, it had to be people of wealth, aristocrats at least, that could afford to even be entertained in such a manner to have cinema, to go to the cinema, plays or what have you. And so this film was, the primary audience were people of power and wealth. And to, share these ideas. Go ahead, please.
I didn't mean to interject.
No.
But when you mention that, I mean, there's a marked difference in the film. If we're highlighting this film on
Birth of a Nation.
Yeah, Birth of a Nation. The original, those that were sort of in the political space were of this wealthy elitist class. And we're holding the elitist class to wealth in particular, and can articulate and can be in these political spaces. But when you look at those who are advocating for the removal of segregation or for freeing of slaves, they're depicted in certain ways as sickly, with these facial features of that they're conniving, and wanting to something more, like some evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see those in mind, and you witness that in the mulatto woman who desired all throughout. She's only desiring wealth and to be famed and things of that nature, and hated when she was told that she had to do things right. And so that depiction, these little nuances in the film that says anyone who's mulatto or who's a slave or black, dark colored, don't desire to work, don't desire to make a great nation. They just desire to just sit around and do nothing and dance and do that all day. So you have these clear frameworks and lines of thinking throughout that film, because it's a silent film, right? You can't speak it,
right?
So you got to show it. And that for me, it was disturbing. That's a disturbing piece, but marks what you're talking about in these hierarchical spaces of, if you are in line with American thinking, then you're hardworking. That you have education behind you. That you have a sense of honor and duty. When they show the white workers, they show them as blacksmiths and things of that nature. Once again, they particularize where they're working at.
Mm-hmm.
A blacksmith makes things, right? He makes, whether they're kitchen objects or objects that can be used in the day-to-day. And it's hard, laborious labor, but it's an honorable thing. Slavery, those working in the cotton fields or picking cotton, it's not honorable work. That's why we give it to the slaves. But blacksmithing, it's that precursor to the industrial nation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they take that away from us too. These little nuances of things in the film are really kind of marking something that they want to uphold, their framework of thinking, this one way. And this one way is the right way.
Mm-hmm.
This one way is a noble way. This one way is one that brings you strength. This one way honors the Southern belle and the woman, like we mentioned. And it really places those who are people of color or the Black or the mulatto, because those were the two particular ones, in a negative light, because they're saying they don't want that. They want it without the work. And they want it without doing it nobly. Another instance is when, they're in the political space, and then you had a Black person taking off his boots and putting his feet on the chair. Another one is eating a chicken leg or a turkey leg. All of these things to poke at what this is what the Black person who is in the political space doesn't care about our honor, doesn't care about our heritage. Number one, I would argue that's not true.
Of course.
But more importantly, it's saying that if you're going to fit in those spaces, you can only do it one way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the piece we're trying to erase is, well, what does meta-modernism say about it, right?
Yes.
Kind of want to move into that, because the Birth of a Great Nation is holding to a modernist framework of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that modernist framework of thinking is very particular, right?
Yeah.
It's this grand narrative that there is only one way.
Right.
That one way is the divine. It looks Christian. Doesn't look like anything else.
Nope.
So it has this universalist framework. It has this idea that you need to be lifted up to be able to see things.
Mm-hmm.
So you see that in the film. I kind of want to show how that gets depicted in the film. The Black slave in the household honors the white man and fights for the white man because they got it right.
Mm-hmm.
They've been lifted up. They've had the honor of being in the house, and so they will uphold, what the privileged, the white slave owner can do.
Yeah.
And will push back against the marginalized voices. So, the film introduces that framework of thinking of modernism, modernist frameworks, about this grand narrative that the Ku Klux Klan is lifting up this meta narrative that is very European, that's very, falls what they would call into the pure. They're white, but it's actually this pure, this Aryan race.
Yeah.
Holy.
Of course.
Holding to the traditions.
Chosen people.
The chosen people, yeah. And
Hey there, listeners. Dr. Waldron here. If you're enjoying the deep dives in today's conversation, we've got something that might interest you. Throughout this podcast, we mention a variety of books that align with various themes, concepts, ideas, as well as theopoetic, symbolism. Whether we're talking about meta-modernism, psychology, spirituality, film, or even philosophy, By using the Amazon affiliate links we've provided in the episode description, not only can you get your hands on these books quickly and easily, but you'll also be supporting this podcast project at no extra cost to you. It's simple. It's a really simple way to show your support and help us continue bringing thoughtful, enriching content your way. So the next time you're curious about a book we discuss, click the link in the show notes or in the description. And thank you for helping us keep this journey going. With that said, let's get back to the dialogue.
As I keep telling you, the film was disturbing for me. I'm glad I watched it,
Yeah.
but it was rough. To think that the framework of thinking, which doesn't honor the other, is rough.
Yeah.
That's the only word I can think of. It causes concern because I do honestly believe that's still the case today, in which I believe meta-modernism is trying to rectify and resolve and deal with in a real way.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think modernism, it's holding or it's moving us into that framework because, when we're looking at modernism, we're also looking at this notion of essentialism. You're obviously familiar with essentialism.
Yeah, of course.
That internally within us, there's this common ground or this thing that doesn't change. So that means in every race, there's sort of like this essentialist piece, and it could create hierarchies within there.
Yeah.
I brought this in my class, and it was interesting to see the reaction. But I says, look, when you're looking at religious spaces, we see essentialism in place.
Yes.
In particular, if we look at the Hindu religion, in which those who are lighter skinned, who are the upper class, they're the priests, they're the kings, they have certain aspects within them. It says these are our qualities, right? These essential pieces that are within us. We've been good, right? Our karma has led us to this point. But those that are in the lowest, who are the darkest, who are working in the fields, they have bad karma.
Yeah.
And they have to work it out. So we have these this piece that within us, in the case of Hinduism, the karma guides us as to where you're at, right? So the essential piece is the karma tells you if you're really bad or you're good, and it shows within your race, your color, your skin color, what you've done. But we see that also in Christianity.
Yeah. It doesn't look exactly the same, but
no, it
yes, it's there. Like Hinduism has a caste system that kind of helps it structuralize its thoughts.
Yeah.
But Christianity, it does it just a little bit differently, right? Where you have like this belief that I have to save souls and convert, right? The great mission, go out and, spread the good news, has been translated or interpreted to mean you need to go out and make followers and believers, convert people over to the way, right? And when you do that, you are definitely saying that everyone comes from God, but not everyone's in God's grace. And so in order to convert them, to save them, to be in God's grace, like you know God's grace so well that you have to now make it your duty to go bring people over to your side. I'm not saying this is like 100% wrong, because we see fragments of this in other things too. But we see how it becomes harmful and problematic when they start using ideas and structures and terms that then develop into doctrine, which are like law-abiding beliefs that you do not question. You don't question how gravity works. You just know it works, right? Doctrine kind of is like that, where you don't question it. You just know based on faith that these are real and this is true, and you just go about your day. But then when spaces like this emerge and arise, we start questioning these principles, these ideas. We challenge them. We push back a little bit and saying, isn't this a little outdated now that we have more information? Why hasn't this been updated? Right? And because it hasn't been updated, there's no ripple effect of healing. There's no ripple effect of accountability. There's no ripple effect of we're still under development. Interesting enough, really quick, in my dissertation, we wrote about and talked about how theopoetically the church in America has become very constantly stable. Like it's just absolutely in one place. It shouldn't move. It shouldn't change. It shouldn't go under any development. And this idea that the church is so perfect, the symbol of the church is so perfect, it represents God. It makes us then think, is the God that I believe in or we believe in, an absolute, perfect, finite God that has no errors whatsoever? It does not change. Even though new data is being presented every moment, you mean to tell me that God just is not affected by these changes at all? Like, so just doesn't have to change with us? And so it got me thinking. I went down this whole rabbit hole of just, maybe this is not for me. Maybe we need something else that helps us understand how a living, organic, mutual eminent God is at play. Because for me, looking in the Bible and the way it's been interpreted most times, it doesn't seem like that God fits into this newfound belief structure, this more open, developing, underdevelopment process, because everything's moving. So if this thing is not moving, what do you think is going to happen? The essentialism is tricky though, right? Because go ahead. Yeah.
No, you bring up something very fascinating because you're tying in sort of the evangelistic movement framework of Christianity as an essential part of its livelihood, right? Its existence. And you're right. The most unique aspect of Christianity is its evangelical fervor. Judaism didn't have it at the time. Roman pagan religions did not have it at the time. Christianity, in its particularity, what makes it unique as a religious movement is their evangelistic, mission-based movement that maintains itself historically in different ways, and what makes it nuanced, right? And I would argue is what also makes it fall in line so well with Roman Empire and its evangelistic growth or its growth, right? As a framework of thinking, as it's taking over land, its growth and taking over land, that continues from Roman Empire to European Christendom, and then still permeates into the Western hemisphere of the United States and continues that type of evangelism is a key component, and I think it's one of the most destructive parts, because that is where we get our problems of that requires, like the decolonization, post-colonization, where we get colonization from, right? When we're looking at, let's say, Latin America, and you have the Catholic Church coming in, but it's not the Catholic Church, it's actually the empire that comes in, right? You use the church to redefine symbols, redefine values for this cultural group, and the cultural group thus loses value, loses symbols and who they are, which then requires that sort of decolonization or post-colonization because, hey, I've lost my values. I don't even know what they were.
Yep.
And I kind of have to say, okay, be aware of it and say, we can't do this anymore because I know this is not me. This is Spain. This is Europe. This is Turkey and whatever. So when we're looking at that, this question of essentialism, evangelicalism is essential to Christianity.
That's so
You don't have
true.
Christianity if you don't have evangelicalism.
Yep.
But then that creates, I'm not saying Christianity creates it, I'm just saying this question of essentialism
hmm
could almost say it creates the problem of race.
Yeah, I was going to say it strengthens it, right? This argument of believing race the way we do, right? Because in the 16th century, the belief of race was different, completely different. It was actually believed that it was of family, of clans, like you were of a group of people. But somehow in the 16th century, towards the end of the 16th century, we get this new symbolism, this new meaning of this reinterpretation of what race is. And then it starts including all these sub ideas. And these sub ideas were focused on biology, to prove that there is a physical, materialistic appearance difference between these group of people. Then the powers that be got scientific minds and academia to support on a larger scale that these beliefs and ideas are fact based on science. Really quick, we get in the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio played a very powerful role in with Jamie Foxx in the movie Django, excuse me. And so in Django, there's a powerful scene where Leonardo DiCaprio's character is articulating and symbolizing in this scene what a lot of Southern Caucasian males, of higher class, aristocrat, intellect thought, that I can prove to you that we are different, that the Negro is different from us, and that we need to govern over them. And it was a very powerful, brilliant, artistic scene representing these very complex, deep issues of psychology, right? Like people thought this way and thought that a group of people were so different that they had the right. They were actually obligated in some circles to govern over these individuals, these human beings, because when you have a religion like Christianity and Judaism from Genesis that support the narrative of God gave man, Adam, the authority and power to name other animals. Like, just briefly think about that from a philosophical standpoint. The ability to name something means you know the essence of it. You know the inner workings of it. You know what it really is. That's how you give it a name. So to give that kind of governance over, the animal kingdom, that's the powerful connection there, because they consider these group of people to be of the highest point in the hierarchy of the animal kingdom, but they were still considered animals. They weren't considered to be human. They weren't even considered in, the great chain of being to be in the same section as God or angels. They were a sub tier of humans, like the missing link between apes and humans. They try to push this agenda to these group of people, and then people were just okay, like, yeah, they should be slaves. It's okay. Nothing's wrong here. It's just how it is, And so, we hope that through this short dialogue, you see, like, we're trying to piece together and help you and your imagination piece together how this complex history is woven together. It affects one another. It affects who we are today, who we think we are today. Like, these are very powerful notions and beliefs that still are in power over us when you think about it. And the only way to really break free from this power or hold is knowledge. That's why knowledge is the key. The better we understand ourselves and what has happened and where we come from and, where we're going, becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we're not here to marginalize religion. I think what we're trying to do is just be honest with these religious frameworks and that they do have problems with it, or there are issues within it Does that mean that you do away with it? No, because I think it's part of the journey of what one is working through. Becoming aware of that, however, allows us to enter into these weird and eerie spaces, places of uncomfort, and maybe engage in that renewal of thinking. And I think that's where meta-modernism comes in. We really haven't talked about meta-modernism. We're still on modernism and its effects. I think we're traumatized by it. I think we're still dealing with it.
Mm.
But I think meta-modernism has an interesting response to that. But before we even get to that, that'll probably be in the second podcast. I think if we were to finish up with modernism, I kind of wanted to make another point.
Yeah, please.
We've been saying that since modernism has this way of saying, hey, there's this one framework of thinking, that it creates this sort of like essentialism that within each group of people, there's these inherent qualities.
Mm.
Some are made to lead, some aren't.
Right.
And those fall within races, right?
Mm.
Europeans, because they're much more advanced, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we fail to see that probably some of our greatest writers and thinkers are from Africa or from Asia.
Definitely.
That enter into Christian movements.
Mm-hmm.
And we all of a sudden become colorblind when it comes to the spiritual. In that, I want to say, breaking. I think that what modernism is kind of doing there is we're now being challenged to say, hey, that sort of like essentialist quality doesn't really work, and they're trying to hold on to it when we're racist. We're holding on to this modernist idea that there really is only one way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we fall into this pattern that if anyone thinks differently, they're wrong because I have the right way. And I think that's a problem. I think what that does, it forces us, the others, whoever the others are, to have to assimilate.
Yes.
And the image that comes to mind is the Borg from Star Trek, right? What does assimilation look like? It's the Borg, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's my technical entryway into it. It's like, hey, one way of thinking, we all look the same. It's this hive mind mentality. And that's great because one thing happens, everyone is automatically attuned to it and resolves it.
Mm-hmm.
That may seem like a good thing, because the Borg really like, this is great, but those outside of it who may be free thinkers or have these other frameworks of thinking are like really, really scared. Really, really scared. I want to throw in because it came to my mind, and I remember there's a reading in Calvin, John Calvin, and he goes, and I'm paraphrasing this. I'd have to look at the text, but he goes, we have to get to the point of saying that God's way is the right way. And he goes, God doesn't force that on you. You will eventually come to the mind of it. That's assimilation to me. That's the slow down progression that this is the only way. There is no other choice. And that's what happened with the Borg. They beat you down. They slow, there's that like that slow. It's and if you were to look at the way Star Trek handles it, it's like the ship is getting closer. I'm doing everything in my technology and might to break away from it. But it's slowly progressing, and it's learning, and it's making its own changes. And it comes, it overwhelms. And this is what it does. I take what is most valuable of yours and I take it into mine. But my hive thinking and the essentialist qualities, which is the thought patterns and everything from it, remain the same. I'm just going to make sure I take what's best of yours and add it to mine so then I can continue to attack or assimilate your kind more easily.
Mm.
That is the problem of modernity and what is known as this dialectical way of thinking.
Mm.
My critique of dialectics is that, hey, I have this one idea, here's another idea, and then we have a synthesis. But what it hides is that we're still thinking on the first idea. I swallow up the second idea, take what's best of it, and keep going.
Mm.
Assimilation. And that's something you got to be careful with dialectical thinking. The hope is that it's more a 50-50, but that's not usually the case. It's not usually the case. So I think in modernity, we have to challenge that framework of thinking. And I think that's why it's problematic even in religious circles and why race becomes an issue for society as a whole. Because when you have this religious framework of thinking, right, which is the divine is the only way, that this framework of thinking is the only way, it's really easy to just put that and say, then certain racial groups have hierarchies because they don't know the way and we got to bring them to the way.
Mm.
But I will always have something over them. Always have something over them. Yeah, and that's troubling.
Yeah, very. It makes me think of Columbus's diary.
Mm.
And this is an interesting document. It's public now, but when he came across the early Taínos, he had very specific things to say about them, that made us think. Because Columbus, no disrespect to him, but he represented theopoetically the crown, right? Of Spain, I believe, right? And so at that time, like the crown represented these individuals we're talking about that believe there's one way of doing things, right? And Columbus and his arrival to, which is considered now Puerto Rico, or that area, right? He started exploring and he came in contact with Taínos who were a different group of people that he had never come across. And it was just interesting, the things that he had to say about them. And just to paraphrase, the things that stood out to me the most was he said that they were very simple people, very simple-minded people. He also had a priest that was on his expedition with him. And that priest, to me again, represents theopoetically the church, right? The Vatican, Catholicism, and how when they arrived in, integrated with these people and shared meals and shelter with them, they had these opinions about them, about the Taino people, that were very much the feeling of these people are beneath us. They're like 5-year-old children. They're not that smart. And we need to take care of them. Like this immediate, natural feeling that we need to make them better. We need to give them our way, and going back to what you said earlier in the discussion, completely just wiping out our beliefs, our culture, our identities, symbols, even our theology, because it wasn't even considered that they had a notion of God, that they were praising and worshiping like skulls and things of that nature. So in layman's terms, the priest and the church didn't understand spirituality in an indigenous way. So they just discarded it and said, no, this is God. And, you have to read the Bible and you have to dress a certain way. And this assimilation,
Yes.
that is a killing of a people. We're not just talking about people taking on new ideas. We're talking about people completely being disattached from who they were. And then structures that are in power perpetuate this gap, this disconnection, never allowing us to have a moment to, go back and, preserve anything that was significant, because everything was considered insignificant and primitive and beneath and all this, And so like that, it's very horrific, to think about these things like this. in one aspect, people look at religion like Christianity and say, it saved me, it helped me, and honestly, I'm glad for them. I'm happy for them. And I'm not saying that whatever they experienced is not real. What I'm saying is, on a larger capacity, these symbols and meanings are hurting people in a way that has been manipulated through, beliefs and structures and ideas that are not our own. They're alien to us. So if anything, I'm into the sci-fi as well, and I like this whole new aspect of horror these days with fungi. Imagine fungi or some parasite gets in your body and attaches itself to your brain, and you don't even know, it's there and it's in control of you and it's living off of you and all this stuff. And I think about stuff like that, and I'm just like, that reminds me of the very thing we're talking about, right? These ideas latch themselves to our brain and our mind like a parasite, and we don't know that it's there. We don't know that something needs to be done. And so it grows like a cancer or a tumor until it becomes life-threatening.
Gauss Deleuze, my mentor probably kill me because I'm saying his name wrong, calls that the image of thought, right? A thought that gets solidified to an image, so that when you hear the word, let's say, cross, this is an example, what we get is this unfolding of words, terms, concepts that just get laid out, right? This concretized image. And I think that's what you're alluding to, because when you have something that's controlling you, it's already given you the way of framework of thinking, and so on and so forth, so that's how you do it. And then you just move on from there. That's why he calls image. He thought that was a problem. He always felt that was an issue, and figured out other ways in which the imagination, the imaginary, and how it creates images are meant to be more dynamic. But going from there, as you were talking, I'm appreciative in the space of Christian theological thinking, womanist scholars, mujerista scholars, third wave feminists, Latin liberation scholars, post-colonialists, decolonialists, acolonialists, thinkers, because what they're trying to do is they're not trying to reconcile what we see as this progression of European thought, but still having to grasp and come to grips with, how do I take my religious upbringing or my heritage, and this other one, which has something. There's something in it. I can't talk. I can't say what, but I gotta deal with Jesus. I have to really deal with Jesus, because Jesus was impactful. Why would people follow him? So there's an impact. The same thing we have to ask about Muhammad. The same thing we have to ask about the Bab and Abdul Baha. The same reason why we look at Mahatma Gandhi and so on and so forth. There's something about it, right? These shamans, if you will, because they're saying something. So, and so you have these thinkers that are challenging our framework of thinking. I'm familiar. I'm remembering Dwight D. Hopkins' book, where he tries to reconcile African religion and the spirits as essential for part of our upbringing, right? Because we still got to deal with the trickster spirit and this other spirit, and how does that combine with Christianity? What does that look like? Or Dolores Williams and her understanding of Jesus, the cross, and its relation to Black history, right, or slavery, and its upbringing, and what it's done to Black men, and the call of Black women in the midst of this, right? Sisters in the Wilderness is one of her main texts. looking at Mitzi J. Smith, who's a womanist theologian right now, and she's phenomenal, rethinking that. She's truly if I were to argue, a meta-modern thinker on that, who critiques and deconstructs, but is reconstructing.
Mm.
And I think that's a call that what this is what we're seeing, right? This really trying to change Christianity, because the beauty that we see in the traditions, what's behind it is so ugly. And that's what you're alluding to when we're looking at colonization, things of that nature. Behind it is there's some events that are problematic, but there's a beauty to it too. There's that tough part. There's a beauty in Catholicism. There's a beauty in Eastern Orthodox that we cannot deny. Maybe it's because of the mystery that it upholds. But with it, we have Reformation. With it,
Yes.
we have Catholicism's pairing with empire.
Mhm.
With it, we have Eastern Orthodoxy pairing with the state, and not really having power over it to deal with it.
Yeah.
And really briefly, we have this really interesting construction of power and authority when we're looking at Charlemagne, who really, he was pivotal in Christian history as he does European Christendom, right? He really
Right.
pushes and builds on it. But the depiction, one of the pictures, is where he's the way it goes is that they call and make him the Roman emperor. He's in Europe. He's a Roman emperor. And then the priest, the Pope, lays prostrate and kisses the ground in honor of the king. And then the king has to bow down to the Pope
Yes.
so that the Pope can crown him, but
Mhm.
also say the authority and power are God's, and God is the one that's given to you. So there's this interesting interplay between the church and its power and empire.
Mm.
I think we have to reckon with that,
Definitely.
because and funny enough, you might think, well, what does that have to do with it? It does deal with race,
Does.
because it's really from there we have these lineages that says, hey, this is a divine lineage. The line of Charlemagne, the line of, I think, Otten something, become divine lineages, which is we have these long-standing frameworks, and when they have their own genre of literature.
Mhm.
Machiavelli's The Prince, those Prince literatures.
Mhm.
That creates a framework and a line of thinking that leads to hierarchy. Hierarchy leads to, there's a difference between people of color and myself.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It gets to that. Now I might have done sort of like that. I may have jumped, right, slippery slope, but I don't think I am. I think when we have those in leadership that start saying, okay, I'm building this industry, I'm building this nation, I need people to work for me, I'm going to take the lesser people,
Yeah.
and I'm going to benefit from it. That's what feudalism is. Feudalism is, okay, I'm building a kingdom. I'm going to have lords. These lords are going to have farmers. The farmers are going to take 80% of their produce, make sure it goes to the kingdom. They only have to stay with 20. I don't have to work for that. I
Mhm.
just create a lord. I have power over the Lord. The Lord has power over the people. I make sure he has some land. I make sure he has some riches. He has authority. The Christians get that.
Mhm.
Priests had feudal authority, creating power structures,
Yeah.
unhealthy. That's reckoning with the Christian history.
Mm.
Um, that's reckoning with that, and that, and I say that framework of thinking becomes racial inequality.
Does.
Um, and I think that's why, meta-modernism, when we start thinking about what meta-modernism is, I think a way of thinking about meta-modernism is that they say, hey, the world is complex, but we can work towards something. Let's we know it's complex. We know it has all this ugliness within it, and it has good but it has good in it. It has bad, but it has some good in it. Let's embrace it. Let's acknowledge it. But let's build a better future.
Right.
And that's what meta-modernism does. And one of its tasks is to push against this idea of a universalism, this idea of essentialism, pushing against assimilation, pushing against, in racism in particular, that there's no such thing as biological racism, that they are socially constructed. And I think that's where meta-modernism is an interesting turn. It is a wokeness, if you will.
Yeah, it is. It is. This has been an amazing dialogue. We have to wrap it up here. If you like what we have been talking about, you're interested in continuing this journey with us, please look forward to episode 2. If you like the content, subscribe, share, like it. If you got questions or you want to join the dialogue, hit us in the comments. We will be looking, and we're always looking to broaden our dialogue. We're not into exclusivism. We haven't made that clear already. But yeah, anything else you want to close out with?
No. Well, we still have a lot to talk about. We have to talk about postmodernity.
So much more.
Yeah. And some of what we've been writing, I only mentioned weird and eerie once, but it highlights some of the meta-modern stuff. So hopefully in our next podcast, we'll talk about it.
Definitely. All right. We'll see you next time.
Good day, everyone.